All right, let's talk about prohibition. When you start looking at prohibition, you have to look back at the history of it and what really leads to it. And part of that is the idea of fermentation versus distillation. Fermentation is the first step in creating alcohol. This results in a mixture that ranges from 6% to 12% alcohol. This is what you'd find in like what you'd say an everyday common beer is. When distillation comes into place, it's the process of removing the water from the mixture and results in alcohol that is 40 to 60% alcohol. And so that mixture raises the amount of alcohol that is consumed. And of course, with a higher percentage means a larger effect on the person, and of course, then a larger effect in society as you end up with more people affected by alcohol. Drinking was part of the American culture, and of course, when distilled liquor becomes into place, the drink of choice, it becomes a major problem. The average American over 15 years old consumed 88 bottles of whiskey each year. That's 3 times more than you would see today. The saloon is also an issue. It becomes more than a place to grab a beer. The roles of the saloon. It was a gathering place in the neighborhood. You can find a job, learn English, keep up with current events. All these things will be happening as kind of the centerpiece of the community. People will go to the local saloon, and that's where they would go to find those things. It was also political too. A lot of bar owners were able to use their popularity to gain political office. People liked them, and it would start off with local things, local positions, council members, things like that, and then it would go from there. The saloons most of them were owned by the breweries themselves, and so they made a lot of money selling the booze that they made in their own saloon. And of course, there was competition, and with competition, more you say, how do I make more money in it? And they did that by just making more saloons, and of course that means more than that were necessary. More saloons equals more people with access to alcohol. More people with access to alcohol means more drinking. The temperance movement was not new at this time. It had historically been against the drinking of alcohol. They had created things like the Anti-Saloon League, the WCTU, and Washington's were modern organized groups that worked against saloons. These were people that were out to say that alcohol was a bad thing, that it leads to bad things, and there's no reason for it. And so these people are out talking against alcohol quite a bit before this. So this is not a new thing, but it really starts to gain steam during this time period. All right, so let's look at Prohibition fever. The government placed a tax on all liquor sales, which of course creates an income for the government, right? And governments make their money through taxes. 75% of New York State's revenue was through liquor taxes. This tells you a couple things. One, how much money they can make on it, and two, how much people were drinking. And so they are a big obstacle to prohibition movement. The governments and the money that they're going to make on this is going to be a big obstacle. However, if you could come up with another way to make that money to replace the money that they lose through liquor tax, then you could say, well, we could get behind prohibition. We could get behind something that would get rid of alcohol if you could find a way to fund it. Here comes the 16th Amendment. The 16th Amendment, as Congress has the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without appointment among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration. In other words, people have to pay the government money on a tax on the amount of money that they make. Of course, the more money people make, the more they pay in taxes. Well, that's not just the federal government, but that's the state government as well. And what happens is we've just found our money that we need to replace the prohibition. So, income tax encouraged by many different groups. Progressive wanted to redistribution of wealth. They thought that if we tax the rich more on their income and the poor less on their income, this would start to balance things out. The rich wouldn't be so rich and the poor wouldn't be so poor. It hasn't really worked out that way, but that was what they wanted. Prohibitionists wanted this because they said, hey, you said that if you got rid of the liquor tax, you'd be broke, but we found a way to support that by this income tax. So both groups started to pressure the government to adopt the tax as the 16th Amendment. Anti-alcohol groups wanted to make sure that a prohibition was an amendment to the Constitution, not just a law that could be changed in the future. Sometimes you put laws in place, the next election comes around, and different congressmen vote different ways, and they might change that law. So they wanted to make it a much more lasting and important thing. So they made it into a amendment to our Constitution. Up to that point, no amendment had ever been repealed. So they thought that if you made an amendment, it was permanent. On January 6, 1920, the 18th Amendment went into effect. The manufacture, sale, and transportation of intoxicating liquors within the importation thereinto or the exportation thereof from the United States and all territories subject to the jurisdiction thereof for beverages purposes is hereby prohibited. Basically saying that manufacture, sale, and transportation of liquor is illegal, not the consumption. The Volstead Act, guy by the name of Andrew Volstead, right here from Minnesota, writes the plan, the action behind the amendment. Has three purposes: regulate the manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquor, not the consumption. It wasn't about busting people who drank alcohol. It was about stopping the people from bringing it in, or for creating it, or for selling it, and therefore you would stop the problem. All right, so immediate consequences. Obviously, loss of jobs. Anybody who worked in breweries, bottle makers, barrel makers, truck drivers, waiters, bartenders, anybody who had any connection with the liquor industry lost jobs. Their income was gone, and of course, that's going to have an effect. There's also resistance. Crimes against the Doom Amendment took place the day it went into effect. People were still making, transporting, buying, brewing, selling alcohol, even after the law was in place. It wasn't something that was just going to go away the second the law came in place. People weren't just say, "Oh, there's a law against buying booze. Well, then I shouldn't buy any." Instead, what happened was there was a consequences that went beyond what they thought was going to happen, and that's bootlegging. This is where they make, distribute, or sell illicit goods. And we're talking about liquor, computer software, you heard of bootleg records or something like that. This is where you're illegally making, distributing, and selling something that's not supposed to be there. All right, in this case, we're talking about liquor. The intent of the prohibition was to reduce crime and corruption, solve social problems, improve our health, all those kinds of things. In reality, the opposite was achieved. It increased crime, increased corruption, and we're going to see that it does not lead to the improved health of some people. So, the speakeasy. What is a speakeasy? The places where illegal liquor could be bought and consumed. Other sources of huge profits came from these establishments, and it was secret. It was extravagant. All right, so people, there were small, hidden places. Some were high-end restaurants, complete with entertainment. But in any case, it was kind of a status thing. If you knew where a speakeasy was and you knew how to get to one, or you could go to one, that was a status thing, and that was another thing beyond just the drinking piece that you could get at a speakeasy. Here you see that prohibition in full effect, with all these Americans definitely in support of the 18th Amendment, or maybe not. And here you can see kind of like the secret door entrance into what doesn't look like it's a very important thing, but then you get inside and you really see what it is. All right, the temptation. The draw of enormous profits from illegal liquor-related activities turned many to the life of crime. So people really saw this as, people still wanted to drink. They still wanted alcohol, and so there was an opportunity. So people started to make money, and lots of it, from bootlegging, so they did it. It was really a good plan by the government, at least an idea of how to clean up society. It just was poorly executed. They made alcohol illegal, but didn't really enforce the new amendment very well. And of course, that made it really easy for criminals to prosper. It became easy money. The profits for legal industry made it easy, and then of course they had lots of money. They had lots and lots of money, and so they were able to bribe or buy off law enforcement. They were able to bribe politicians, the courts, and of course that just made being a bootlegger that much better. It even made criminals out of common folk. Most people didn't believe in prohibition, so they willingly went out and broke the law. combined with the corruption that was in place from the politicians or the police, this is a general disrespect for the law, and it led to more things beyond just the bootlegging. All right, so competition leads to conflict. Of course, everybody, if one person makes money off of it, everybody wants to make money off it. So it becomes these enormous profits that lead to increased fighting between basically where you could sell your stuff or where you could make your stuff or what business you're going to get. And you basically had gangs. This is where we're talking about Chicago mob and Al Capone and those guys going off and fighting against, maybe the New York City or whatever the case was over who's going to sell what and where. Until you get things to like the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre happened outside of a garage in Chicago, and a bunch of gangsters got shot down. Not anything different than what had happened, but it happened. It was very public. It was in the newspaper, and what people really started to realize that there's a problem, and so something had to change. Violence was bad for business, so the conflicts between groups had to brought unwanted attention, started to hurt the profits. You had major crime bosses got together to work out and organize their stuff, create an approach that was less shoot 'em up and more business-like than anything else. So, how is Prohibition working out? Well, eliminated thousands of jobs, lost the government $11 billion in liquor tax revenue while spending $300 million to enforce it. It led to corruption of police and judges and court systems and politicians. It ended up organizing and turning our average everyday criminal into a syndicate that was fueled by this illegal liquor business. It was money that was fueling this and turned our average everyday criminal into a businessman. John D. Rockefeller said, "When Prohibition was introduced, I hoped that it would be widely supported by public opinion, and the day would soon come when the evil effects of alcohol would be recognized. I have slowly and reluctantly come to believe that this has not been the result. Instead, drinking has generally increased, the speakeasy has replaced the saloon, and a vast army of lawbreakers has appeared. Many of our best citizens have openly ignored Prohibition. Respect for the law has been greatly lessened, and crime has increased to a level never seen before." Here you got some guys going out with signs picketing the amendment, saying, "We want beer." On December 5th, 1933, Congress adopted the 21st Amendment that said that the 18th Amendment was repealed. It's the only amendment of the United States Constitution that repeals a previous amendment. And so they get rid of it. So I always remember this way. The 18th gets rid of alcohol. The 21st brings it back. Well, I think of it this way. The drinking age in the United States used to be 18, and now today, currently, it is 21.